What's going on, guys? How are you guys doing? The Real Sharif M here, aka Manganus Steel, with a admission. I love American tactical knives, but the relationship status is complicated. So what do I mean by the relationship status is complicated? Well, in the knife world, there are a lot of really good options for EDC. And a lot of what appeals to us is like stuff like this. This is the Flytanium Arcade, great little knife. Comes in S35VN, if I'm not mistaken, is relatively thin and slicey, has something like a shark lock, titanium, micarta inlays, right around 200 bucks. So you have a lot of options for, good quality EDC knives out there in a range of prices. So why the interest in American tactical knives? Well, American tactical knives completely blow a lot of these standards out of the water. You tend to get a heavy built, hard use kind of tool that is really a derivative from like a war fighting deployment, knife fighting mentality. And to be honest, there's just nothing else like it out there on the market. So editing Sharif here, I was editing the video and I realized I didn't kind of convey something about what is the appeal of American tactical knives. And a lot of the appeal comes in having something that is built tough, is kind of conceived from the ground up to be like a hard use tool. It's not something dainty. It's not something that you're going to go to your white collar office job with and is going to be like a style piece for these users. Like the people that American tactical knives really appeal to are the people who want something tough, reliable. It's going to be the sledgehammer kind of knife, and not so much a sort of fashion accessory, I guess is the best way to explain it. And I'm not saying that a lot of people buy knives for fashion. That is just the mentality of your kind of typical customer who wants this thing. And, also there is the sort of patriotic element of it as well. They want to support an American maker. And because of that, they're willing to tolerate some of the sort of things that your average EDC user would consider unacceptable, and that's up for the individual to decide on their own. But there is something to be said for them, really. And as you'll see, I'm here for it. As many of you guys know, I am a huge fan of my Emersons, this one being a CQC 15. And this just does not adhere to any of the usual EDC knife sort of tropes or standards. This is the CQC 15, and man, look at this thing. It's got a 4-inch blade, recurve with an American Tonto tip. This is done in 154 CM, not even CPM 154. You have very aggressive G10 handles. If you think Spyderco makes aggressive G10, you have never experienced an Emerson. Titanium liners instead of steel liners. And of course, almost all American tactical knives, I think actually all, come with a bent steel pocket clip. or if it's not a bent steel, it's a bent titanium, but it's still this kind of bent metal pocket clip. I changed mine on this particular Emerson just because the ergos worked a little bit better. You almost always also have open construction and you have washers. This particular guy runs on nylon washers. And unlike a lot of other EDC knives, as you can see, this thing uses traditional Phillips and straight edge screws. So why do I like this thing? The truth of the matter is it's just because it's a big, beefy, serious American-made piece of steel. And to be honest, I can't justify it. I mean, the 154 CM is done at 57 to 59 HRC. It's a big chunk of steel in comparison to a lot of the slicer, thinner blades that are out there. But for my big American hands, this thing gives me a perfect grip, and I love it. I really do. And I've said it before on live streams, and I'll say it again now. If there is one knife, like if I had a bug out situation and I could only take one folding knife, this would be on the short list because I wouldn't need any specialized tools or hardware to be able to service and clean it or deal with it. I could use a Leatherman or a Swiss Army knife. Hell, I could use this Leatherman free T4 that I just happen to have sitting on the desk and service the whole knife. There is some logic to the process. Now, you may not care. You may have, Torx bits and stuff like that with you in your Go setup, but for me, that's not a guaranteed thing. The real honest to God's truth is that there's something about Mary in this world of American tactical knives. And if you're sort of, curious about this stuff, really, I think one of the best entry points for you would be the Emerson Mini A100. The Emerson Mini A100 is a much smaller knife. It's about a 3-inch blade, but it has all of the Emerson sort of qualities about it. Still has the 154 CM blade that is... Now, this is very unique and interesting about Emerson's. He tends to do chisel and V-chisel blades. You rarely see a symmetrically ground blade. What does this mean? It means that on the show side, you get the primary bevel and the edge bevel, but then on the lock side, you just get a primary bevel. The reasoning for this, and quite frankly, in my opinion, this is one of the best approaches to solve this solution, is you get a thick behind the edge blade, which is actually incredibly robust, but you don't sacrifice a lot of slicing ability. This thing actually slices very, very well and punches way above its weight in terms of slicing ability and blade stock thickness. Really, the only reason I can say that this is not as popular is just because the edge bevel is very tall, and people don't seem to understand or appreciate the variance between the two in the setup. Truth be told, if I'm going somewhere where I can only take a 3-inch knife and I want to have the reassurance of a do-all thing, something that I could, use a bit harder, abuse, but also, can give me traditional slicing capabilities, I think the Mini A100 is one of the gold standards, and it's just really nice, compact, and does everything that I could possibly need it to do. So I love this thing. This is actually one of my all-time favorite knives. Now, when dealing with American-made tactical knives, you tend to have to bite the bullet in spending more money. And really, that is no more evident than when you start dealing with things like the Spartan Harsey. Spartan Harsey is not a cheap knife. Luckily for me, I found this one on sale at Blade HQ for about $375. And I jumped on it. You know, these usually go for around the $500 price point. I think the reason why I was able to get this so cheap was because this is an S45 VN model and they're phasing that out in favor of Magna Cut. This thing is so big it barely fits in frame. So you've got that kind of slightly recurved with no sharpening choil, mind you, blade, drop point style, big thick handles, you know, reversible pocket clip tab there, bent metal pocket clip, and just thick boy antics all throughout this thing, man. I love it. However, there's something that you need to understand if you're trying to get into that Spartan Harsey life. And this is not a slicey knife. It just isn't. This thing is basically, you know, like a big, thick boy pry bar kind of style of knife is the easiest way to explain it. You've got thick blade stock, very thick behind the edge geometry, and a 30-degree per side edge bevel. Most knives that you're getting in the EDC world have a 20-degree per side edge bevel, 18 degree per side edge bevel. This guy, 30 degrees per side edge bevel. And that's nice because you get these nice thin edge bevel lines. If you wanted to lay this thing back, those would be much, much more dramatic, kind of like what we saw with the Emerson here. I mean, these edge bevels are gigantic if you care about something like that. But this thing is just a literal tank of a knife. It is. And a lot of people will get this thing and regrind it, or they'll lay the edge back. And truth be told, I haven't done that because it is what it is. Like, I have a bunch of knives that do that kind of job. And this is the only one that is like this. So why am I going to change it? If you want something slicier, if you want something more sort of like EDC friendly, go get a Chavez. Really, you'll get a lot of the same experience here from a Chavez, but with EDC ability in terms of slicing and performance. If you still really dig American-made knives, you definitely got to bring Strider into the equation. This is a Strider SNG, and I got to admit, once I received this, on loan to me, I had to actually disassemble it and clean it up. And there were just a few little things that kind of bothered me. I noticed that the blade centering wasn't 100% perfect. It was about like a 0.5 mil off. And I cleaned it out. I, put some Chris Reeves fluorinated grease on the washers in this guy. And I Loctited it, and once it went together, man, this thing really sings. This guy has this complete and total G10 show side, which I think this is called the Gunner finish. I could be wrong, but it is really nice. And unlike a lot of the other Made in America examples, this has a fairly pronounced sort of backspacer. Why is that? Well, with how Striders are constructed, this is the stop pin for the opening action. But if you look when this thing closes, this is actually not making contact with the titanium, and really, nor should it, for where it would fall. So what Strider does actually is use this backspacer as a blade stop, which is very interesting. I've never seen any other knife do that. But what I dig about this thing is just I don't know what you call these, sort of like nuts here, but these just kind of capture it, and they're very smart, because if you think about it, you can't really screw into the G10, but it lends itself to a look, to a vibe. And this thing is surprisingly slicey. What's really cool to see is Strider is going over to MagnaCut, which is pretty dope. This is a MagnaCut model, and you see a lot of this same sort of standard American traditional tactical knife stuff going on here. You got the bent pocket clip, washers, kind of thicker blade stock, as you can see, but this one is symmetrically ground, and as a result is much more slicey. I will say one thing that the American tactical knives have over a lot of knives is ergonomics. I never thought that Striders were going to be this comfortable, but they are. This choke-up grip, dare I say, I prefer to any Spyderco that I've ever had. And even the choke back grip, this little peak right here kind of digs into this like crevice in your palm, and you just get really nice, strong control over the blade. I have become a big fan of Striders. Question is it really worth the money? I don't know. And when that kind of question enters your mind, really the best answer for that is ZT. This is a perfect example of a ZT, and it's a hinderer. This is a hinderer Eclipse. I love this model, but I'm not, generally speaking, a fan of hinderer. So ZT offers a much more affordable way of getting into an American-made knife without having to spend American-made tactical knife money. Okay, let's kind of go down the line. This thing, the Emerson CQC15, this is an over $300 knife. The Emerson A100, you are going to be spending well over $200. For a Spartan Hersey, you're going to be spending $500 if you don't get it on sale, and that's for a bare bones model. If you want a Strider, even one like this with G10 and a single section of titanium in MagnaCut, you're going to be spending over $500, right? So if you can get your hands on a ZT, you can finally get an American-made tactical knife design for under $300, which, for the size, the blade stock thickness, the materials, is actually a steal relative to the rest of what's out there. What makes, kind of the ZTs really nice, and particularly like a ZT hinderer like this one. This is the Eclipse Spanto model. It is a bit of a beefy blade, as you can see there. Actually, not a bit. It is a beefy blade. But this thing still slices, and I have been able to use this thing quite a bit in heavy use to EDC use, and I've been very happy with the performance. Like some of the others here, you do get full titanium on the inside here, but you also get something that none of these other knives have. And I'm not sure you're going to be able to see it, but you do have a steel lock bar insert, which is kind of cool and kind of important. Because guess what? All of these other knives here, they have all had ruthless lock stick from when I got them. Now they don't, but they did, and it's part of the experience. You've got to work through that. This guy, you will be good to go out of the box. Now, personally, I have these are aftermarket scales. This is, I believe, an aftermarket filler tab, and this is an aftermarket hinderer pocket clip that I got that matches the whole look. But man, like, you get a thick boy 20 CV blade, titanium steel lock bar insert, just really, really great craftsmanship. And unlike the others, this one rides on bearings, which does make it incredibly smooth. The other guys need a significant amount of break-in. Having said that, I love washers. And like, if my Harsey is any example, I mean, this guy is on the tighter side right now, but I mean, look at that. This thing is beautifully smooth. I am a big washer fan. I love that hydraulic sort of feeling. It just, one hand's so nice and controllable action. I don't know. It's a different feeling, guys. It's a different feeling. But here's the thing. If you don't care about that, if you want just snappy, drop shutty action like you're used to on your EDC knives, you can get a ZT. So really, I highly recommend ZTs. I think that they are a wonderful way of getting into American tactical knives without paying the price and dealing with some of the things that you may not really be happy about, because you don't experience stuff like lock stick and grit and, high prices for, what we in the EDC world would consider like subpar steels or heat treats or whatever. I mean, as I mentioned, like, Emerson does their 154 CM at 57 to 59 HRC. I know Spartan does their S45 at 59 to 61 HRC. And I'm pretty sure Strider does their Magna Cut the same at 59 to 61 HRC, which is on the low side of acceptable, But all of these guys will make the argument that they want toughness, and that is their primary concern. There you go, guys. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. Are American-made tactical knives for you? Thank you for tuning in to this video, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Peace.